This is Law of Attraction Explored. I'm Tim Grimes. If you'd like a free guide that explains the hidden link between relaxation and the law of attraction, or if you want more information about my books or my coaching, you can visit radicalcounselor.com. Enjoy the episode. So I want to continue on the theme that we were discussing last episode and give it a slightly different angle, approach it in a way that I think will seem both familiar and at the same time unique from some of the different approaches we've discussed so far in regards to feeling better, in regards to manifesting, and in regards to the law of attraction in general. And as always, I want to let you know, because it's so important, that any term I use is not to be set in stone. It's malleable. That's what makes these ideas and concepts powerful, is because we can interpret them in our own way and build upon what we've already learned in regards to the law of attraction, and then apply it more effectively by hearing these concepts and approaches explained again and again from just slightly different angles. I really firmly believe that, and that's why this podcast exists for the most part, is to explore these different angles, to deepen our belief in these principles and to deepen our personal understanding of these principles. Because the more we believe in the law of attraction, the more effectively it's going to work for us, at least generally speaking. So I apologize if it just seems sometimes like I'm rehashing the same thing over and over again. But as you know, it is for a reason that I'm doing that. And so I want to go back over what Coué said about how it's impossible to think of two things at the same time. That is to say, two ideas may be juxtaposed, but they cannot be superimposed in our mind. And every thought that completely fills our mind becomes true and has a tendency to transform itself into action or manifestation. And we were discussing last episode how the issue that we run into so often is that we have a thought, or even a series of thoughts of something that we want to manifest. Like, for instance, let's say that we want a new house. And we have that thought, we're able to have a series of thoughts that make us believe and feel that we are in this new house. But then soon thereafter, we have a much longer succession of thoughts that dispute the reality of this and say, this is not happening, this is not true. You know, in short, all this resistance comes up for you. Now, at that point, you can just keep on persisting. And there's all these different ways to persist to bring back the feeling of having a new house, of manifesting what you want, and doing it again and again in whatever way suits you. And one way we have not discussed that is very relevant to what Coué is saying here, and is more, I would say, laborious than most of the approaches that we've discussed, and that's one reason we haven't discussed it yet, is simply to make it so that the series of thoughts that are going through your mind in regard to your desire are constantly reminding you of the desire in a positive way. So in this example, I want a house. I want a house. I'm going to get a new house. This is great. I'm living in a new house. I'm soon going to be living in a new house. I don't care exactly what wording you are using. The point is you're thinking about moving to this new house. And then what usually comes up is we stop paying attention to this train of thought as much, and then all these doubts creep in. But what you can do, a way to make it so that the thought of this new house is filling your mind consistently, is just to constantly bring it back to that. In other words, be thinking to yourself throughout the day, or be speaking to yourself out loud, I'm moving into this new house. This is really happening. This is going to happen. This is going to keep on happening. I'm moving. I'm going to be moving by such and such date. I'm moving into a new house. This is wonderful. I'm moving into a new house. In other words, you don't let the train of negative suggestions come in that say this is not going to happen if you consistently are just telling yourself that it is going to happen. Because only one thought can fill our mind at a time. And as we went over last episode, usually maybe a positive thought fills our mind, but then it's quickly replaced by a negative thought and then another negative thought. And so it doesn't build momentum. But if you build a positive thought and it fills your mind, and then you consistently fill your mind with those thoughts, and there's just no room for negative suggestions, then you're well on your way to your manifestation occurring. And in the very least, to be thinking about what you want in a totally different way, in a much more positive way. and in a way that will make it so if you don't get the exact desire that you want, you're going to get something similar or better than it in your own life, at least on an emotional and energetic level. You're going to feel better if you're thinking more positively. And a lot of the time we say, well, I don't know how to think more positively. You know, my thoughts seem to get negative so quickly and I don't know what to do. And, you know, in this show, we're going over what to do, all these different approaches. And a lot of times, you know, I say stop being serious or don't think or get real still. And those are all ways to mitigate and subdue and neutralize these negative thoughts. But another way, a more active, laborious, constant way, is just to constantly be thinking to yourself and affirming to yourself or repeating to yourself, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. To keep on repeating it so, again, there's no room for those negative thoughts to squeak in. And it's okay if the negative thoughts do squeak in. It's like, oh, no, you're not going to be able to get a house in this market. You don't have the money to buy that house. Because when those thoughts start to squeak in and build a little bit of a momentum, you're aware enough to just be like, I'm moving. No, I definitely am moving. I definitely am moving into a new house. I definitely am going to be moving into a new house in the next month. I'm going to find a place. This is unbelievable. I'm going to find a place. And you can be thinking all this stuff in your head. This does not have to be out loud when you do it. But the point is, active intervention, even if it's just silently in your head, active awareness, it's basically like a mental diet you're doing, where as soon as those thoughts that dwell in the negativity about how you're not going to get your house, as soon as they come up, you nip them in the bud and just think the opposite. Now, obviously, another approach we discussed, which might be more simple for a lot of us, is just to think of God instead, or just think of something higher and better instead. You can do that too. But that's kind of different in terms of the specific nitty-gritty technique we're talking about here. This is just like basically forcing your idea onto your mind constantly in a forceful denial of it not being there. If every thought you're thinking is positive for the most part, let's say that, you know, you're able to make it so that the majority of your thoughts are positive about this, about what you want, it's going to neutralize that negativity and neutralize it to the degree that's necessary for things to change positively and for the manifestation to occur in some significant way. I hope you're following this, because it's very interesting, because it goes back to these fundamental points that the law of attraction is emphasizing and that Coué emphasizes better than anybody, which is that it's impossible to think of two things at the same time. And if our thoughts are, for the most part, positive about what we want, then the positivity is going to creep into our life. And the actual physical manifestation very likely will creep into our life in some way sooner or later. But in the very least, we're going to be feeling so much better about what we want. Because again, the issue with standard affirmations, standard autosuggestion for a lot of people is, you know, in the morning when they wake up, they say their affirmations or autosuggestions, and before bed, they do their autosuggestions. But unless you really feel relaxed and decent throughout the day about what you want to materialize or manifest, there's many more negative thoughts that are building momentum during the day that simply overpower the positive thoughts and suggestions that you're giving yourself in the morning and in the evening. And that's not going to happen if you are just consistently watching yourself and inserting positive thoughts about what you want all day long. Someone who's really good at explaining this and explains it in a unique way is somebody who's on YouTube named Sami Ingram. Some of you might have heard of her. She is a relatively polarizing teacher. And I found out about her because she talks about Neville. And she gives some very interesting and unique approaches about how to use Neville's advice. And I think the most fascinating thing that she discusses is what we're talking about now, where you basically are just thinking positive thoughts. You force yourself to think positive thoughts, which is not a new idea. A lot of teachers have talked about this before. But the way she describes it, the way Sami describes it, is very powerful. And she also talks about this thing she calls rampaging, which is where you talk out loud and you basically insist to yourself that you're going to get what you want. That's similar to some of the things I talk about in The Joy of Not Thinking, and most of you know how much I advocate for speaking out loud. It's just a way to feel better. And again, this falls along the same lines. But a lot of this just comes back to realizing that if you feel like you can't control the negative thoughts going through your head about what you want. If you want a new house and your thoughts throughout the day seem to constantly come back about how it's impossible for that to happen. And obviously the house is just one example. It could be a certain amount of money. It could be a health issue. It could be a relationship issue. Whatever it is, if you just feel like there's no way to corral all of this negativity and you don't want to go on just a more traditional mental diet, the way that Emmett Fox talks about it, if you'd rather kind of actively deal with all this negativity, you simply replace the negativity, the negative thoughts that come one by one, with positive thoughts that come one by one. The negative thought comes in there, you immediately replace it with a positive thought. Oh, there's no way you can afford that house. Oh, yes, I can afford that house. I absolutely can afford that house. I'm going to be moving to that new house. I'm going to get this new house. It's an interesting approach. It's not something that I necessarily utilize that much because I tend to be much more of a laid-back type of manifester, if you want to use that term. I'm a laid-back person in general, but this active assertion is something that really appeals to me and that I might explore in my own life more. Because I know active assertion in terms of stress management, like I talk about in The Joy of Not Thinking, is highly effective, not just for me, but for a lot of the clients I've worked for and a lot of my readers. And so I think this active assertion in regards to the law of attraction and manifesting specific things or manifesting feeling less stressed in this way is potentially really powerful and worth exploring if it appeals to you, this idea. So I thought I would mention it because it's kind of a different angle than we discussed before, in a way to kind of actively get in the way and stop your negativity from being there. Because you can only have one thought at a time, and that thought can be either negative or positive in regards to what you want. And you can make it so you just keep on inserting positive thoughts again and again and again. I hope this was helpful.